Hello everyone. So for the past couple of weeks, everyone has been talking about tariffs. There are tariffs which have been imposed by USA to the global world. Now, you must be wondering what these tariffs are and how does it actually impact us, consumer, and the world in general. So in today's video, we will talk about what tariff is. So we'll go to the basic, talk about the definition of the tariff, how does it actually work, and what are the impacts that it can have on the consumers and on the global economy in general. And in the end, we will talk about the main objective of US to impose these tariffs. Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Uesata. I am a financial risk management professional. I have more than 15 years of experience in more than 17 countries around the globe. In my last employment, I have been working as a lead economist and I have been following the trade war and all these tariffs related policies for the US for a very long time. So in this video, we'll talk about these topics in a lot of detail. So let's dive in. Bismillah. Now let's start our discussion with the definition of tariff. So tariff is a federal tax which is applied to the goods across the border. So whenever there is a country that is exporting good to another country, that's where tariffs are implemented. For example, if China is exporting steel to USA, US can say that, since you are selling it to the people in the US market, you will have to pay a tariff of, let's say, 10%. So whatever the cost of that steel is, for example, if it's $100 per unit, you will have to pay an additional 10% of tariff. So the cost will become $110. Now that's a separate discussion that we'll do later, that who bears the cost actually. But the broad definition of tariff is that it's a percentage that is imposed when there is export and import included. It's separate than the import duty. Import duty is similar to this tariff concept, but it's indirect and is borne by the consumers. This tariff is usually borne by the producer. So if there is a company in the China which is exporting this steel, they will have to bear this cost. So their product will become costlier. So if the cost was $80 and they were making, let's say, $20 on this particular unit, now their margin will reduce to $10 because they will have to pay this additional $10 of tariff on this product. Now, why these tariffs are imposed? So the first purpose is that it raises funds for the government. So as I told earlier, a tariff is a tax by the government. So all of the tax money, all of this tariff money goes directly to the government. So it increases the revenue of the government. So of course, when the revenue increases, the fiscal deficit would decline if there is a deficit, and that will strengthen the revenue generation ability of the government. The second thing is that as tariffs apply to import, it can be used to redistribute money from consumer towards domestic producers. So usually, generally, in practice, these tariffs are targeted. So for example, the country wants that the domestic producer of car should be used. So domestically produced car should be used in that particular country. But there are imported cars or there are imported parts coming from other countries which is sold in the local market. So what country can do? They impose tariff of, let's say, 50%. Now if a car was sold at $100 or $100K, now the price will increase by 50%. So it will become $150K. So what it would lead to? It would lead to less demand of that imported product because the local product will become more attractive, more cost effective. So this is how the countries actually use tariff to localize or to support the local manufacturer. And then tariff can also affect the global market. So it can strategically shift global prices or sanction against foreign exported firms. So if there are particular firms, particular countries from which the government want to discourage import from, they can introduce these tariffs. So it could be country specific as well, and it could be firm specific as well. So there are there are number of agendas when it comes to implementation of the tariffs. Now let's talk about why tariffs are imposed. On this particular case, why Trump and US government imposed these tariffs. So as explained earlier, tariffs are imposed to support local manufacturers, local products. So the idea behind this, as I see, is to encourage the local markets. Trump has always been an advocate of promoting the local manufacturer and discouraging the exports. He has been termed that the other countries have been taken advantage of the US market and have not been paying enough to the US market and US government. So he argued that US should impose tariffs to boost its economy. To boost its economy. How does the economy boost? Because all of these products will be manufactured internally, so there will be more production, there will be more employment, there will be more tax revenue that will be generated for the government. So all of these would be produced locally, and that will positively impact the economy of the US. Now he also says that it will encourage US consumer to buy more American made goods, and it would lead to increase the amount of tax, and it would lead to further investment in the country. For example, there are certain products which are used in car manufacturing. Now, if the tariffs are imposed from Canada, from which it imports most of the car products, car parts, US will make investment and it will start producing the car parts which are now more expensive after implementation of that particular tariff. This particular process is considered as substitution. So what you are doing is you are discouraging the imports and you are substituting those imports from other countries with locally manufactured products. It's a very positive sign for the economy, and it helps a lot in building the economy, but it's a long-term thing. In the short term, the consumer has to pay the cost as well, because if they have to build the car, they will still have to import that particular product from the Canada at a higher price, for example, at a tariff of 25%. Even if they start building their auto parts, those substitution, it will take a couple of years at least to be able to build of that particular quality. So that becomes one of the key challenges while imposing these tariffs. Another objective of this particular tariff is that Trump wants to reduce the gap between the value of goods the US buys from other countries and the values of those it sells to them. We call it export gap. So we are saying that if US export $900 billion and it imports $1.1 trillion, the gap would be around $200 billion. Trump and the government of the US wants to decline these numbers to be able to be more sustainable in terms of external account and external deficit. Now, these tariffs, as I mentioned earlier, are mostly targeted on products. So what they do is, for example, as again I mentioned earlier, if they want to promote the car manufacturing industry, they will apply or impose tariffs on just the car parts. And when they do so, the car manufacturing will be shifted to local manufacturer, and this particular sector will impose. But when they do it at a blanket level, this is something that happened this time, it impacts the local economy significantly. For example, around 60% of the imports of vegetables comes from Mexico. Around 80% of the toys in the US comes from China. Now, these products will be expensive because of these tariffs, and it will ultimately be impacting the consumer, and it will lead to inflation as well. So this is the science behind tariffs are imposed, but in a sense, it has an impact on local consumer in the US as well. And that's why implementation of these tariffs are always challenged and are not taken well by both the US economy and the global economy as well. Now let's talk about what are the tariffs which has been implemented by USA. I won't talk about it because the number is significantly changing over every other day. Earlier, there were separate numbers as a base as 10%. So 10% of tariff was applied to almost all of the countries. Then there were certain numbers. For example, for the China, it was I think about 34%. For Pakistan, it was about 29%, and so on and so forth. But what happened is that most of the economies on which these tariffs were imposed, they started talking to the US and they said that it should be reconsidered. And what happened a couple of days back is all of these tariffs are paused for next 3 months, and only tariff on China has been imposed effective immediately, and it has been increased to about I think about 125%, which is the recent number, because China has been increasing the tariffs on US product as well. So they did not talk about the negotiation. They have been saying that if you increase the tariff, we will increase the reciprocal tariff as well. So now China will have to pay a higher tariff if they export to US, but in the same time, US will have to pay a higher tariff as well when they will be exporting to China. So this is sort of similar to what trade war that was back in 2018 in the first term of the US, of the Trump. Now let's talk about the impact that these tariffs can have on person, on the people, consumer, and the global economy in general. So this is a research by JP Morgan which mentions that number one, it can lead to decline in US and global GDP. So USA has a GDP contribution of about 25% in the global economy. So if USA economy goes down, the global economy goes down as well. So after this tariff implementation, JP Morgan expects that the GDP of the US and the global market is expected to go down. They expect it to go down by about 0.3%. So that then they also expect that consumer could face higher prices as a result of tariffs. So as I mentioned earlier, the tariff on the vegetables and on the toys and on the car products, all of this will have an impact on a local US citizen. Because of the tariffs, there are certain products which we term as necessities in economic terms, which cannot be replaced, which cannot be substituted. And since this tariff is on a blanket level, it will impact the US consumer, and the inflation will increase. When inflation increases, it impacts interest rates. Interest rate also increases. It has an impact on the employment as well. So when the prices increases, the demand of that particular product decreases, which leads to slowdown in the economy, which impacts the overall employment level of the country. So here's this whole economic cycle that may be impacted by this first decision by the Trump administration. Then the risk of global recession rises to 40%. So there is a 40% chance that not only US but the overall economy will go into recession. This is something that could happen after COVID-20 2019, when the global economy actually went into recession. Then it could lead certain industries. For example, President Trump imposes 25% tariff on steel and aluminium that could drive up the prices of various goods ranging from autos to canned drinks. So there are a number of products that can have an impact due to this tariffs, and of course it could lead to rise in inflation as well. This is something I already covered. Then there's a tariff on auto as well, so it could impact the auto sector as well. Then in the end, financial markets witnessed a significant meltdown after these tariffs. So we saw that stock market all over the world crashed once these measures were announced. So how financial markets work? They work in a way whenever there's uncertainty. So what this tariff did, these tariffs brought a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility to the market, and basically nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. And when that happens, market crash. Since, for example, there are Chinese companies, they know that their cost will increase, their profit will decline. So the shares which are there, which are trading for example, at 100 yuan, will start declining. It won't be worth that much. So the stock market started declining, and all over the world, financial markets crumbled. Now, it also recovered as well once Trump announced that the tariffs have been paused. Today and yesterday, we saw some massive recovery in stock market as well. Now, the last question, which is probably the most critical one, is why Trump decided to pause these measures immediately. So there's no significant, any critical definition, explanation of this, but there are two things that can be discussed. Number one, which is discussed by almost all of the analysts, which is that there was significant decline in US Treasury bond market. So if you understand financial markets, how does it work? Whenever there is a volatility in the market, in any part of the world, what people do, what investors do, they start investing in the US Treasury bond market. That is considered or told to be a safe haven for the investors. So whenever there's volatility, people are worried about the future, they start investing in the US Treasury markets because they think that it's the safest or risk-free market that we can have. Now, what happened this time is that investors actually started selling the treasury bonds, especially from the fund managers in the Japanese market, and the US Treasury bond market started going down significantly. Now, there are certain implementation of this particular event. What one of the indicators is that people are actually losing their confidence on the strengthening or the strength of the US dollar and US economy. And that's not a good sign for the US economy. And analysts are saying that just because of this factor, Trump had to revise this particular measure. Another theory is that maybe US was targeting the tariffs on China right from the beginning. It is pretty much similar to what they did in 2018 when there was significant trade war between US and China in the first term of Trump. Now, they had this in mind, they implemented a different strategy, and at the end of the day, they let everyone go and they told China that you are accountable and you'll have to do it and you will have to abide by our terms. Again, this is a power game between US and China. Again, another conspiracy, we never know. We never know what was the prime reason, what was the major reason, but as of now, sitting today on 11th of April 2025, there is a pause for 3 months on these tariffs that can be extendable as well. But there is still war going on between China and USA on tariffs. So whenever US increases their tariffs, China increases as well, and it's still going on. So this is what we had from this tariff war. Hope you liked the video. If you have any comment, if you have any query, if you want to add anything that I missed in the video, please feel free to comment. See you in the next video. Maassalam.